Let's talk about some equipment now. Many riders, many feedlot riders will be riding young green horses. A lot of people send colts to feedlots to get some miles on them. This is probably one of the best basic bits that you can start with. This is an egg butt snaffle bit. Now the definition of a snaffle bit is any bit which does not have leverage. One of the things that we mistakenly call a snaffle bit is anything with a jointed mouthpiece. And the reason that we kind of get trapped in that little deal is that most snaffle bits, which are non-leverage bits, do have a jointed mouthpiece. But that's not what makes them a snaffle. A snaffle is a bit where there is no leverage. 1 pound to pull on the rein gives 1 pound to pull on the horse's mouth. So this is a very mild, very gentle bit. The thicker the mouthpiece is, the more mild the bit, okay? And so we can have an O ring here, we can have an egg butt here, we can have a D ring here, and we can have various mouthpieces, but this is pretty big, pretty thick, and again, this is meant to be ridden two-handed, where we can pull a horse's head around both directions. And most of our horses that we train, we want to be able to bend and flex that horse from side to side to gain control. The advantage of a jointed mouthpiece is that we can work on one side of the horse's mouth independently of the other side. So if we pull on the right rein, only the right side of the bit works. If we pull on the left rein, we can work on this side of the horse's mouth. Where if you have a solid bit, anytime you pull on one rein, the whole bit twists in the horse's mouth. So most people, when they're training horses, will ride with some type of a jointed mouthpiece in the middle so that we can independently work on one side of the horse's mouth or the other. So this is probably the best type of bit to be riding a young horse or a green horse or a horse that needs bent or flexed or limbered up, softened up. We always go back to the basics, and this is where the basics start. Okay? As we progress up the training of a horse, we might go to a bit something like this. Very similar mouthpiece, but now we have added a little shank, which gives us leverage. We have added a chain or strap that goes under the horse's chin, and that's called a chin strap or a curb strap. And so now we brace here, and when we pull here, it puts an additional amount of pressure on the horse's mouth. The longer the shank, the more leverage, the more severe the bit becomes. This is a pretty short shanked little bit, and so this bit is not very severe, so it's a nice step up from just a ring type snaffle into actually a curb type bit which has leverage. So similar mouthpiece, we can still work on one side of the horse's mouth independently, but we now have a little bit more leverage and a little bit more power. This is just one more step up. Just a little bit longer shank on this bit, same mouthpiece, but again, more leverage, more power, more brakes, I guess you would say. But again, as we get into problems, what we don't want to do is keep going to a more severe bit. We need to go backwards and get that horse broke and trained and soft and supple and bending and giving. As we go up the ladder here, you can see that this is a more severe bit yet, simply because the shanks are longer. The longer it's shanked, the more leverage, the more pressure we put on the horse's mouth. And again, theoretically, the more control you would have. But if you don't have a horse that's broken trained in the first place, you will create problems by putting too much bit in this horse's mouth. All of these bridles that I've shown you so far have had split reins, 2 single reins, okay? This particular bridle has what we call closed reins or roping reins, that they're all one piece, okay? You say, well, that's the kind I like. They're handy. I don't drop them in the mud. They're just one loop. Now, we need to talk a little bit about safety. There's some things that can go wrong with bridle reins like this. Recently, I was on a trail ride with a really good cowboy. His horse swung its head by the windmill pipe, where the pipe was coming out of the windmill, caught that rein on the end of the windmill pipe, which pulled this rein back, and that horse pulled back so hard he flipped over backwards right on top of the cowboy because he had closed reins. Also, another little story, a fellow was sorting cattle in an alleyway at a sale barn, and a calf ran past the front of his horse and stuck his head through one of these reins, and they had a major wreck too, with calf and horse all tangled up in the reins. So there are times when closed reins can be a little more dangerous, where the single rein you can just let it go and you can get out of a storm a lot quicker. So there's some pros and cons of different types of reins. Some people say, well, I need a tie down on my horse. My horse throws his head constantly. Well, this is a tie down. Again, this goes over the horse's head. This would go over his nose, and the tie down strap would hook on the front ring of the cinch. Now, how short should a tie down be? If this constantly is tight, your horse can't work very well because you've got him snubbed down. If this has a lot of slack in it, your horse has his head way up in the air, it's really not doing any good. So we need to have the right length of tie down. So a good rule of thumb is to take the tie down and just see, with the horse's head in a natural position, can you touch the horse's throat latch right here with the tie down strap with that horse in a normal working position. So we're pretty close here to a correct length, okay? It's a good idea to tie your tie down to the breast collar up here so that it doesn't dangle down there, because it's possible for a horse to drop that tie down so low that he sticks a front foot over the top of it. So we need to be thinking about safety. Some feedlots will not let you use tie downs because they've had severe accidents caused when you hook the tie down on the gate latch. Some of the gates that have the rod that kind of is angled, once in a while you'll hook these on one of those gate latches, and now your horse is in a terrible wreck. He gets claustrophobic and he does something pretty disastrous. Okay, so those can cause some real wrecks if you get your horse tangled up and he can't get loose.